This canal is over 100 years old. It never opened, but it did help sink a federal government. Wait, what? This is the Newmarket Canal. It was supposed to connect Newmarket to the Trent-Severn waterway. Early this summer, I did a video about that waterway, its various types of locks, and how they work. There's a magic link up here, and I'll put a link down in the description so you can find it when you finished watching this video. So, what's the story of this canal? Let's go for a stroll along the canal, and we'll talk about it.
Indigenous people had long used a route called the Toronto Carrying Place Trail to travel between Lake Ontario and Lake Simcoe. An eastern branch of that trail ran along the East Holland River, and after traveling both branches in 1793, Lieutenant Governor John Graves Simcoe decided to build Yonge Street close to the eastern branch. Newmarket was founded at a convenient location along the way. In 1853, a railway line north from Toronto ran through the area. As I mentioned in my video on the West Toronto Rail Path, links in the usual places, in the mid to late 1800s, there was a real frenzy of railroad construction in Ontario, and in Canada in general, with many of them going out of business or being bought out, and this one was no exception. Originally chartered as the Toronto, Simcoe and Huron Railroad Union Company in 1849, it became the Ontario, Simcoe and Huron Union Railroad the following year. After falling into financial difficulty, it was bought by the Northern Railway Company of Canada in 1858, which was then bought by the Grand Trunk Railway in 1888. It's been through additional owners since then and is currently owned by Metrolinx and operated as the Barrie GO line, but it was the Grand Trunk that provided the nudge that led to this canal.
In 1904, the Grand Trunk raised its shipping rates, but even worse for businesses in Newmarket. They charged for shipments as if they traveled all the way down to Toronto, costing shipping fees for over 50 extra kilometers. Local Member of Parliament William Mulock, whose name lives on in Mulock Drive, a main road in Newmarket, had an idea. The East Holland River, behind me here, goes from Newmarket up to Lake Simcoe, and Lake Simcoe is on the Trent-Severn waterway, much of which was already built, and construction for the rest was well underway at the time. So, just build a canal up the river to Lake Simcoe. Problem solved. Easy, right?
Well, yes and no. Conceptually, yes. Just dredge the river to make it deep enough for barges and put in a few locks to handle the relatively minor elevation change and you're done. But there were several problems with the idea. Sure, the waterway connected to Lake Ontario, but it took a long and somewhat meandering route to get there and ended up in Trenton, a small town way east of Toronto. And the era of using canals to transport goods was ending, with railroads proving superior. The Trent-Severn itself was completed in part because it included hydroelectric generating facilities which to this day remain in operation near several of its locks. Oh, and there was this other problem. Every time you operate the locks on your canal, water flows downstream and needs to be replenished from upstream. Except that there really isn't much of an upstream in Newmarket, and from early in the project the supply of water had been noted as a problem. Mulock was a key Ontario figure in Sir Wilfrid Laurier's government, and the canal idea was popular locally, so the Prime Minister supported it. The project proceeded with public funds. There were various types of problems along the way, including political wrangling, issues around cost, and personality conflicts between many of the politicians, government officials, and engineers involved. A dredging contract was given to a company with no dredging experience, with predictable results. At one point it was found that the water supply would struggle to keep up with evaporation during summer, let alone be enough to run the canal. Plans to use a lake several kilometers west as a water source required additional work since that lake naturally drained to the west, away from the canal. The government officials who were supposed to review the plans instead redesigned the canal at about double the cost. The new plans called for locks larger than the locks on the Trent-Severn, even though that would be useless since the Trent-Severn was the only way in or out, so larger barges would have nowhere to go. Combined with calling for the canal to be deeper, the bigger locks just made the already questionable water supply situation worse. A plan was concocted to pump water all the way back up from Lake Simcoe to Newmarket. All the design changes kept pushing the price higher and delaying work, The canal came to be known as Mulock's Madness.
Up to this point, the government had largely been able to keep the cost of this canal buried by including it as part of the larger Trent-Severn Waterway project. In 1909, the opposition attempted to force the government to split this canal's costs out so that they could then use that as justification for an attempt to cancel the Newmarket Canal project. The government nearly lost that vote. Basically, the same thing happened each of the following 2 years. And then in 1911, Prime Minister Laurier dissolved Parliament, and the opposition Conservatives relied heavily on the Newmarket Canal in their election campaign as an example of egregious and wasteful spending by Laurier and his Liberals. Mulock had retired from elected politics in 1905, citing poor health, although somehow he managed to live almost 40 years after that. His successor also supported the canal, which was very popular with constituents, but he did not run for re-election in that year. The Conservatives won the election, including this riding, and promptly put this canal project on hold, while ordering the government's chief engineer to conduct a review of the project. His report was damning. He found that there would be significant ongoing costs to operating the canal, with little or no prospect of any significant amount of commercial traffic using it, and the most cost-effective option, in his opinion, was to cancel the project. So that's what the government did. This is the northernmost lock on the canal, in Holland Landing. Today's Yonge Street Bridge uses this canal as its bridge abutments. And this is the second lock. It's a couple of kilometers upstream from the last one. And here, about 1.5 kilometers further up the canal, is the location of a swing bridge that once crossed over the canal. Now, the pedestrian bridge you see behind me is not the original bridge, but you may be able to see beneath the pedestrian bridge the gear mechanism from the old swing bridge. The cost of manning and operating this bridge was actually part of the calculation as to whether it made sense to pay the cost of finishing the canal or just abandon it. Amazingly, the swing bridge, the original swing bridge that was at this location, was the Green Lane Bridge over the river and the canal until 2002, when a new modern road bridge was constructed. And a little bit farther up the canal was the site of the third lock. You can see in the distance behind me some of the remains of the lock. Today, a pedestrian bridge carries a recreational trail over the canal at this location. The canal portion of the river ended just behind me here. It used to end in a turning basin, but that was filled in the 1980s and is now buried under the parking lot for the GO station on the other side of the river. And now, just as we've come to the end of the canal, we've come to the end of this video. I hope you enjoyed learning about the Ghost Canal. If you did, you know what to do. Please like and subscribe.